Michelle.
Daniel.
OG Rose. So today we're going to talk about material versus content. A lot of what we consume in terms of words and masses of words is called content. Maybe also because it usually comes with images too.
Sure.
But in the past, a lot of times you would be consuming words, and the way you would what it would be called would be material. It's just interesting. It's a very collective term for what we call these blurbs and writings and pictures and information that creators make. It's like content. And in the past, it would be like, what material are you reading? What reading materials do you have? And I just think that's really interesting because materials has much more of a fabric sense.
Sure.
And also it has a more of a building sense.
Right.
Whereas content is, well, it's also the word content. I think that's fascinating because I don't know if it maybe subconsciously makes us almost like content, like we're not reaching always as far.
Right.
We're not maybe doing some of the harder work to go beyond the content because it's just there. It's like you're content with the content, you know. It's just all there, neatly packaged, and like it's in your little bag. That's your contents. And so I think that's fascinating because I'm like, what? It could just as easily still be called material, but it's called content. And I just think that's shifts in language, I think, can be indicators.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's always interesting and I think important to note those shifts.
Oh, we had that conversation with Lou about, how changes in language say something about the quote-unquote collective consciousness and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's kind of funny because the phrase you were saying, I was saying content, like fake tent. It's like not native into material or anything. It's a content or something like that. Well, yeah, material. What's your material? You get your paper together, you get your pen, you gather your portfolio, all these different languages we would use that have this kind of physicality to them. This kind of material, what's your material. But now we talk about content. What content are you posting, are you putting up? And there is something too interesting about as if the person who's watching it is content because they just have to sit there and consume.
Exactly.
Where material has this language of, you got to build.
You got to do something with it. It's like you've got your reading material of Proust or something, and then you're going to take that and do something with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because you go and see somebody's content, like they've made this content for you, and you just consume it. You just sit there and consume it. Like this content is there, as opposed to here's their material. It's almost like
well, that's the thing. I also think material is actually like, it's like you're still making something. You're still in the process. Like I think that okay, you have let's say it's Marcel Proust. He's got his whole book.
Yes.
It's finished per se. Yes, of course. But he knows that his book is in a dialogue, right?
Yes.
It's in the great
the
conversation with the reader, with other writers, with history, with the past, present, future. And so there's something about that physical, wordage, if you will, that was material. It was ongoing.
Oh yeah.
Whereas I think content gets very encapsulated.
Finished. You either like it. It sounds, content is something you judge, not participate in. There's this kind of idea that here's my material. Like if I said, oh, Michelle, here's my material. It's almost like bricks and glue and different. I'm handing you my material. Now you have to go do some work. But if I say, oh, here's my content, well, then I'm basically
you just kind of look at it.
You just look
shiny.
at it. Oh, and you tell me, do you like it or not?
Yeah.
Content really feels like a term that suggests that your job as the receiver of the content is simply to just judge it, to like it or dislike it, to eat it. Where material, if I'm passing my material to you, it suggests that you need to go do some work with it.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point too, where we said about like the tactileness, because the word content is became such a largely used word with online consumption of
goods.
Wordage.
Yeah,
right?
wordage.
And so it's not tactile.
Not at all. No.
It's not tactile at all. And so it's like you're saying, it's much more, you know, you're doing, you would be consuming words in the past too. You know, if you're reading a book or something,
Sure,
you're consuming it. Yeah.
Sure.
But because of this shift in language, I do wonder, like, I think we used to make more out of what we received with books, and this probably has to do with like McLuhan and Postman with like hot medium, cold medium, and things like that. You know, when you have to work a little bit more to get through something, you actually then kind of, it's just like you build momentum, right? You have to actually do a bit more work to actually read a book.
Yeah.
So it's like you build momentum, and then like you kind of just, once you finish the book, you're kind of still going.
Sure.
Whereas with content, because it's like, okay, how many, whatever, there's character caps on pretty much every social media thing. So it's only going to be like, but so long.
Sure.
First of all. And second of all, it's fragmented. It's all these kind of like bits, you know, and this is not to discredit content. You know, there can be a lot of good content, actually. It's really just to think about the language shift here and what that might subconsciously be doing to our disposition toward it, and then also what is it doing to our engagement with that whatever it is, wordage, right? Like thing you're consuming or taking in, and then what does it do? How does that shift in language change what we do with what we just took in?
You know, I think everything you're saying is very interesting to me, because there's something about a book, a physical book, that when you pick it up, it presents itself as something you must do something with. It presents itself like you have to read me. You have to turn my pages. But beyond, in the physical structure of the book, there's something that says you must do something with me.
Well, if you're going to read it, you're going to have to turn pages. You're going to have to sit with it. You're going to have to hold it. You're going to have to hold it.
Yeah, you're going to have to hold it. And there's something about, too, where it's like the book says to you, you must do something with me. And also, too, when you finish a book, it feels like, what will I now do with Tolstoy? What will I now do with Proust? You do feel this kind of sense of, what will I do with what I just read? Whereas with online content, of course, you read it online, but it's interesting because with online content, there can almost be this feeling of, okay, finish that next thing. Finish that next thing. Finish that next thing. Like, you don't read an article and go, what? It's not so natural to feel like I should do something with what I just consumed.
And actually, a lot of times, online content just makes you judge yourself. Or others.
Sure.
And that has to do with the point you brought up, which is that with content, it's because it's this kind of like prepackaged kind of like closed loop sort of.
It's finished.
It
thing. Makes you feel like you're not finished.
Right. Well, but also you just judge it, right? Do you like it or do you not like it?
Yes.
And it's weird, the physical experience of reading a book, or I'm trying to think of, so it's like if you read a book, see a painting, or like you have there's something more physically engaging with it that seems to kind of incorporate that, like, and you know, I always think the word incorporate is a funny word because you know, you've got it's basically body.
Yes.
I mean, the Latin word corpse.
Sure.
It's incorporated. Yes. Right. So it's like it's a physical thing that then it's almost like just to be in touch with it, literally with your touch, is like you're in more touch with what the material is offering.
Yes.
And then you go and you do see life now in light of that. And that can, you know, change your life in many ways. Well, and I guess I'm just wondering, like, it's funny because with content on social media, like, yes, you can see content, I guess that can change your life.
Sure, of course.
But I guess it's interesting because I guess I'm just thinking from a very phenomenological experience. It's different.
Oh, it is different.
It's more onto the next thing, and you feel less incorporated with it.
Well, it gets into, there's something about the infinity of the internet. Yes. The infiniteness. Yep. You always feel like you're behind.
Yeah.
You're always feeling like next thing, and you're always thinking that you're like, oh, I'll use that eventually.
Yeah.
But the time never arrives where it's time for you to use that, or it's time for you to build with that material. Whereas a book, you finish it and boom, it's done. In that phenomenological experience of the finishedness of the book, there is something about it that says, you know, like the I guess the Wilkie poem maybe, where it's like with the statue that's broken and like you must change your life kind of thing. It like says something to you. You know, the completed work says something to you about what will you do now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the fact that a book ends it reminds you of your own finitude. I think that
Sure.
that there's something about that it's weird because, you know, we said like the content is this kind of contained closed loop. It's weird because there's something very interesting happening because a book physically shows its start and its finish.
Yes.
Okay, there's this physical containment to it, but it is actually a lot of times the way you experience it with reading it, you feel much more in touch with the larger, great conversation, as we like
Sure.
to put it sometimes, of other thinkers and you know, philosophers
Sure.
and just humans that
Sure.
just existed throughout the whole time. Whereas with content, so it's weird. It's like it's closed, it's bound, right? I like that too with books.
Yeah.
They're bound. Oh my gosh, I've got all these like word plays with books. I just like I need to just go. Yeah, hash out this poem one day about it. But yeah, so it's bound. With the internet, it's not. And each little content looks like this little, it's almost like this like cute little candies that are all wrapped up with like a little, you know, it's like this cute little shiny paper and it's like, ting! You know, that's your like there's your little contents, like your little cute little truffle or whatever wrapped up and you get to like unwrap it, you know, and you eat it. And it's just like, I think it's weird. It's like it feels like this little contained square of
Sure.
information or whatever, story, narrative,
Right.
whatever, content. But what's weird, Daniel, is that it's not bound at all. It's like a cute little package, but it doesn't have the physical binding.
No.
It's not physically limited, and it's therefore it feels infinite.
Yes.
And yet it isn't.
Yes.
And so it's weird because it almost misses both. Like
Yes.
it's like it's not actually even contained like a book would be, even though it presents itself as this little contained little cute
Yes.
truffle thing that I've
Yes.
been describing.
Yes.
And yet it gets the connection to the infinite internet, right?
Yes.
Which is like, if you want to compare this, the comparison would be the great conversation of infinity, right? Of all
Sure.
times.
Sure.
And this, you know, infinity of continual post or next thing.
Yes. Yes.
And yet it doesn't actually connect you as well to that great conversation, which I think is what truly gets us, I think for me at least, the great conversation always restores a sense of like beauty and power in our humanity.
Oh yeah. Well, it's interesting, I guess, because the term content, it's almost like we use that because it's the content of the internet, and the internet's the context.
Yes.
Which then it's funny because that could mean like false text, so it's a false book, you know, where, you know, these different things on the internet are the content, and it's almost like, it makes me think of the implicit and the explicit, where everything on the internet kind of makes you feel it's infinite, and the infinity is explicit as opposed to implied.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas with a book, the infinity of the great conversation is implied, but it's not so direct.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny because when the internet makes it so direct, it just feels kind of arbitrary and meaningless.
And even overwhelming.
And
like,
overwhelming, to the point where, like, who cares? Or it's better just to ignore it.
Exactly.
Whereas in a book, by making that sense of the bigger picture implicit, it's not so direct and overwhelming that it feels...
It's like exciting, actually.
It's more exciting. And that gets into like all the different books, The Bridge Over the River Derna, or The Veil, and Dante, and The Sun, where if you unveil it too much, too quickly, it overwhelms. And, you know, God's hiddenness and Pascal and different things. And it's almost like with the internet, because the infinity is explicit as opposed to implicit, it doesn't work. It doesn't work so well. It overwhelms us. Now, again, this isn't all, you know, it's not to say the internet cannot be used in a productive way.
Right.
We're just talking about the phenomenological differences, and if one knows these things, then, you know, they can use the internet better. But there is something about how the internet feels explicitly infinite. And how that actually works against that infinity, like making the most of that infinity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point with the explicit implicit. I think that's really, really good. Yeah, and I think too, the idea of, it's funny because, you know, with this idea of content also being the word content, I think if we're honest, a lot of times people are not content.
Well, in the irony, I guess,
it's like they're constantly...
The point of
content...
content...
That kind of connects with the scrolling concept.
Well, the point of content online is to make you content. The point of content is make you content. The point of material is for you to build something.
Yeah.
And that's a totally different disposition. To be toward... I mean, really, generally speaking, the internet, not all of the internet, but a lot of the internet, presents quote-unquote culture as a thing that, you get your content and then you're content. Whereas classically, culture is more like material that then you have to take to build yourself into being a cultured person, per se, or to participate in culture, or to be a good member of the human race,
Right.
But you have to build. You can't simply... It's not enough to just comment and like, and that's what people feel like now. They're commenting and liking, but that's all just to judge your food and to say, oh, how was dinner? Good. You're not really participating in the art of food and cooking and chefery, if you will, by saying the food was good. That there's an entirely different relationship to food, that you learn a skill in art. So it comes with cultured and learning. Like, it must be material for you to develop the true participatory relationship with knowledge that then generates the civilization that we'd all want to live in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also like done that short talk on scrolling on Anchor as well. But the thing is that I think what you're saying is so true, Daniel. And when we consume and then make, we usually generally feel a lot better.
Yes, that's right.
And it's the scale is just so skewed with social media consumption.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Because and not everybody. Like obviously, I think if you're trying to do something and make something and share it with the world, then you end up seeing the good and experiencing it in a better way.
Sure.
I'm talking, social media itself. But I think if you don't, or if you are not making yourself,
right.
like, if you're not, then you do run the risk of feeling very drained by it.
Sure. Look, I mean, there's a sense in which you consume a book, of course. There's a sense in which you consume a physical painting. I mean, the issue is that everything that you encounter, you do want to be thinking about it in terms of, what does this demand of me? Like, what does this mean I must do with my life? Now that I've read this, now that I've encountered this, what does this mean of me? And that sort of disposition to what you take in, one, makes you take it all much more seriously.
Yeah.
You also don't kind of waste time, taking in things you don't need. I mean, St. Augustine in Confessions warns about intellectual curiosity becoming a sin, where like just reading another book or wanting more knowledge or information can be a kind of sin, because you're always just consuming more knowing and you're never doing anything with it. So even a theoretical good use of knowledge, like even if you're not just watching cat videos, there could be a problem there. But I think, to your point, the language of material, of thinking of things in terms of material, in of itself does lend itself, as you as the receiver of that material, asking the question, what does this call of me? What does this call out of me? What does this demand of me?
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas the language of content does not.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like you're saying, it's true. Could you kind of always potentially be scrolling, in a sense, through, one book after another book after another book? Yes, but I think the benefit, though, or I guess what I mean to say, the safeguard that's kind of in place naturally of a book, is you put it down, and then you are left with your own thoughts and daydreams and ideas.
Yes.
And see, the risk is that you don't have those natural boundaries and barriers with social media, because literally, like, what's always in your face is something else. So those pauses, I think, don't happen.
I mean, it's very interesting what you're describing. I mean, it's hard to hold open a book with one hand and turn the pages, whereas a screen, you can just use your thumb and go through things.
There's so few physical
barriers, restrictions,
Yeah, like constrictions or something. Like it's interesting if we think just of the very physical experience. It's with the book, you're going to have to put it down at some point, and like you said, you have to use two hands.
Yes.
To flip the page and just all of those dynamics.
And you can't. Well, and the other the other big thing is on a cell phone. If you're going through the internet, you could literally radically shift topics. You could be looking up a recipe and then be looking at foreign affairs and then reading the Wikipedia on Tolstoy.
Yeah.
Unless you've got 6 books in your purse, you've only got the Brothers Karamazov, which is what I always reference. Or you've always got you're stuck on the one subject.
I mean, you keep 10 books in your purse.
Yeah, it depends on which purse I get. But there's something about the book that also screams, you will focus on this.
That's the thing. I mean, I think that's... So I was just thinking about that as you were saying that. I think that's a great point, Daniel. And, it's funny because reading a book and being on social media both have silence, but okay, let me say this. If we think about what we are audibly hearing, there is nothing necessarily. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of sounds that happen on social media with reels and all that sort of stuff. But I guess what I want to say is like, well, that actually could be a point. Books inherently have a silence to them that then leave you with yourself. Like, yes, you're with the book, but you're also with your thoughts about the book, and there are literally no other distractions. I mean, yes, like maybe you're on a train ride, maybe you're
but there's no sounds from the source. There's no sounds from the source. From the thing you're focusing on.
Exactly. Where
a cell phone,
there's like bells and whistles constantly with social media. So
you could be at one moment reading a text, but the next listening to something and then seeing something. I mean, a cell phone. If you've got a cell phone, it can go from reading to listening to seeing. Rapidly.
Rapidly.
Where a book forces you to stay on a single kind of taking in, per se, a single kind,
mode.
A single mode of apprehension. So it forces you to focus on a single subject and to use a single mode of apprehension for an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. And that, no doubt, has an impact on you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting. I was thinking about silence as a visual, actually. And I was like, wow, there's like, let's say your phone's on silent. Let's say somebody's phone's on silent, let's just say. But they're on social media. There's almost like never silence.
No.
Because visually speaking, there's always a stimulation of...
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Now one could say like, well, there's always the visual stimulation of the words on that page of the book you're reading.
But they're much less noisy. There's not really noise. I mean,
well, what I'm saying is like if somebody's phone is on silent...
Oh, sure.
But the thing is that if you're seeing a whole bunch of different things with colors and words, and like you said, there's also these hyper diverse topics.
Yeah.
You're basically it's like a ping pong game.
Totally ping pong game.
And so I guess that's what I mean. It's like there's very little visual silence.
Yeah, whereas a
book, you've got there's a lot of simplicity.
Yes.
There's ink on a page. There are letters.
Yes.
There's the page itself.
Yes.
There's the cover and the back cover. And it's like there's something about that like you maybe because it is not as stimulating, you may put the book down for a few minutes and stare out at the clouds and then pick it back up again and read. And then you have an idea and you think and you maybe scribble something down. There's just there's so much more space for you to actually think or do something.
Yes.
Whereas with social media, you literally, yes, you'll be thinking, but a lot of it is like almost just very brief reactions. And you're not, and there's so, and again, like, I mean, there can be really great things to social media.
Of course.
But it's like, there's so less opportunity for the pause.
The goal of social media is that you are content, so that you keep consuming.
That's true.
I mean, the point of social media or internet content is so you feel content.
Content to continue.
Yes, exactly.
As like
I mean, the C-O-N, content to continue. You don't continue if you're not content. I mean, the reason people don't read books is because, you don't feel content. It's hard.
You have to keep going.
Books are like, here's some material, and you're like, why?
What? Or it's like,
because you got to go.
We don't even know how to use like hammers, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, basically, no,
hopefully
intellectual
we can
hammers.
use hammers.
I mean, books
like hammers.
Books are like, here, go build something, and you're like, no, and it's like, what?
Well, right, and that's why, like in like the scrolling talk, I was like, if somebody is feeling kind of like this, like ick feeling from being on social media or whatever, then it's just like a very simple rubric could be like for however much time you're spending like scrolling specifically, then take that many minutes to like work on a poem, work on a painting, work on a dance, whatever it is.
It is extraordinarily important that what you consume, you use a very good amount of it as material for something.
Yeah.
Or it's almost like you're eating food that never converts to energy. Like if you ate a bunch of food and you didn't have the internal process to convert it into energy, it would build up and you wouldn't feel good. You need.
That's a really good analogy.
And that's what's happening is you've got people that are consuming a lot, but they can't turn it into energy because they haven't used the skill of writing a poem or exercising the skill of going and using what they've read and using it in their lives. So if you don't use a high percentage, a certain percentage of what you consume as material, then you're going to feel like someone who eats a lot of food that never converts into energy, or very little of it converts into energy. And of course, that means you'll start to feel bad, and that's what ends up happening.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thanks for talking about this.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I think, I think
it's interesting.
Well, shifts in language tend to say something about the collective consciousness.
Yeah, definitely.
They do tend to say something about the spirit of the age, if you will, and so noticing them are really important, and you're very good at noticing them, so thank you for noticing that.
Thank you, handsome.
Thank you very much. For more by OG Rose, for the original reflection, please check out Anchor, and for more by OG Rose, please visit ogrose.com, and thank you for your time.